Today's lesson is Small but Significant, Vatican City and the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
I am Roger, and today we're going to talk about these very small countries that exist in the world. We talked about Vatican City, which only has 0.44 square kilometers of territory. But now we're going to talk about something called the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, which doesn't have any territory at all. How can a country exist without any land?
That is a very good question. I mean, there is a country called Malta. It's a small island not far from the toe of Italy, not too far from Sicily there, that other large island that Italy is kicking, as you might imagine it when you look at a map. But Malta is a modern country. It's not religiously controlled. It's not controlled by the Catholic Church or the Pope, as the Vatican City still is. But there is a long history connecting these two places, or more specifically, a long history connecting the Catholic Church with some knights who ended up in Malta. Here we're kind of touching on Da Vinci Code territory. If you remember the Knights Templar, these were a crusading brotherhood of knights who went off to fight religious wars in the Middle East and what is now Israel, fighting over the control of Jerusalem. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta would be the Knights of St. John, or the Knights of St. John Hospitaller, and they were basically there protecting pilgrims as they traveled from Europe to pray in Jerusalem. And this organization, which started as a fighting brotherhood of knights back in the Middle Ages, they have now evolved into a lot of different things. If you go to England, you might notice a lot of ambulances come from the St. John's Ambulance Service, and they have this black cross that is kind of made up of pointed triangles. This is kind of what we're talking about here, although, as I said, in modern history, these groups have kind of developed and evolved into different types of organizations. So it's a very long, interesting, and complex history, but we're going to get into it in the first part of our article.
In contrast with Vatican City, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta is a one-of-a-kind sovereign entity in that it has no territory at all. Founded in the 11th century as a Catholic religious and military organization, the order was originally based in Jerusalem. However, it later moved to Cyprus and then Rhodes before taking over the island of Malta in 1530. After later losing Malta to Napoleon in 1798, the SMOM was gradually transformed into a humanitarian organization that provides medical aid and charitable services.
大家好，第一部分介绍形容词 charitable， 它的意思是慈善的、仁慈的或是宽厚的。例如 The company sometimes donates to charitable organizations. 这间公司有时会捐款给慈善组织。或者 Megan makes a charitable donation every month to various causes. Megan 每个月都会捐款给不同的慈善机构。
Okay, so let's talk about the first part of our article for today. Again, in our last program, we talked about Vatican City, and in contrast with Vatican City, when we compare them and we see how different they are, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta is a one-of-a-kind sovereign entity in that it has no territory at all. So that's different from Vatican City, which does have territory, but it's very small, only 0.44 square kilometers. In this particular case, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, or SMOM for short, doesn't have any territory at all, but it does exist in certain ways.
Absolutely. Founded in the 11th century as a Catholic religious and military organization, the order was originally based in Jerusalem. So yes, the 11th and 12th centuries were sort of the height of the Christian Crusades, those military campaigns launched from Europe that tried to take over Israel, what is today Israel, what then was sort of their Holy Lands, and control Jerusalem, which at the time was under control of Islamic forces. And of course, they were trying to fight over that piece of land that people are still fighting over today. So it was originally based in Jerusalem. Jerusalem in the Holy Land. However, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, it later moved to Cyprus, to another island just off the coast of the Holy Lands, just off the coast of what is now Lebanon, just south of Turkey. And then it moved to Rhodes, an island near Greece. They were always being chased and kicked out of these lands by more powerful forces nearby. And then eventually they took over the island of Malta in 1530. And they were kind of held at a little bit arm's length by a lot of the European rulers of that time. These military orders were very, very rich, and they had a lot of political and economic power, but they were also very independent. So at many different times, both popes and kings in Europe tried to sort of crush them, get rid of them, and take over their money and power.
Right, so to take over just means to take control of something. You can take over a company, you can take over a country, and in this particular case, they took over the island of Malta way back in 1530. After later losing Malta to Napoleon in 1798, the SMOM was gradually transformed into a humanitarian organization that provides medical aid and charitable services. So later, Malta was taken over by Napoleon and the French in 1798. That's about the time of the French Revolution. And so this particular organization, the SMOM, was transformed or changed into a humanitarian organization. Now, if something's humanitarian, it has to do with human beings or people and the well-being of human beings. Basically, they're there to help people out, to provide medical assistance or financial assistance or whatever.
Exactly. It provides medical aid. As I mentioned, there's the St. John's Ambulance Service, and they also provide charitable services. So yeah, humanitarian organization would often be called a charity. These are people doing good work for others' benefit. They're not a profit-making organization. It's not a company that's trying to earn money. They're taking volunteers, taking donations, and using people's hard work to provide free services, basically, to people who need it. Charitable services. So they're housing the homeless, they're curing the sick, they're helping the poor, they're educating children, they're, helping people out after disasters and natural disasters and military or wars or things like that. So basically, they're doing good work for other people to help those in need, which is very nice and very different from what they used to do, which is fighting big battles and wars and stuff like that. But it's still the same organization. As I said, it's changed and morphed and evolved over many centuries. Let's find out more in the second part of the article.
Despite having no territory, the order retains its sovereign status, which enables it to maintain diplomatic relations with over 100 countries and a presence at the United Nations. This helps the order, which is headquartered in Rome, to carry out its humanitarian mission, while also empowering it to issue its own coins, passports, and postage stamps.
第二部分看到形容词 diplomatic 表示外交的或是外交官的，例如 The two countries have strong diplomatic ties. 这两个国家有密切的外交关系。接着看到名词 postage， 它的意思是邮资。例如 How much is the postage for this package? 这个包裹的邮资是多少钱？也可以说 The postage to send this heavy box will be expensive. 要寄出这个沉重的箱子，邮费将会很贵。
Okay, so again, we're talking about the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, or SMOM for short. And despite having no territory, the order retains its sovereign status, which enables it to maintain diplomatic relations with over 100 countries and a presence at the United Nations. So even though this particular entity does not actually have any territory, it does not have any land, even though this is true, this particular order or this entity retains its sovereign status. It keeps its ability to govern itself itself, even though it doesn't have any actual land, and that enables it or allows it to have or maintain diplomatic relations with lots of countries. Now, diplomatic here just refers to diplomacy, which is when countries exchange ambassadors and diplomats with each other for better relations. For example, we could talk about how many countries Taiwan has diplomatic relations with. If you could count them, how many of those countries does Taiwan have diplomatic relations with? They exchange ambassadors, they have embassies in each other's countries. In this particular case, though, the SMOM has diplomatic relations with over 100 countries, and they also have a presence at the United Nations. That's even better than Taiwan.
That is true. This helps the order, which is headquartered in Rome, to carry out its humanitarian mission, while also empowering it to issue its own coins, passports, and postage stamps. So there you go. It's kind of a paper country, but they are headquartered in Rome in the Vatican City. That relationship goes back many, many centuries. And today in the modern world, they carry out the humanitarian mission. Of course, if there are big disasters around the world, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta or the St. John's organization, they can do a lot to help people, bring in food and supplies and blankets and medicine to help all the people who need it. And it also empowers the SMOM to issue its own coins, its own money, its own passports, and its own postage stamps, just like real countries do. That is very, very interesting. And the postage stamps, I imagine if you sent a letter or a postcard with a SMOM or a St. John stamp on it, it would probably be handled just like any other piece of mail and would eventually end up at its destination. That is a very interesting position that this organization has found itself in after all these years.
Cool. Yeah, it's got its own coins and passports and postage stamps. Where the heck do they have these things produced if they don't have their own land? Well, let's move on now to the third and final part of our lesson for today. We will listen to it first.
Furthermore, although the SMOM is a Catholic order, it has its own governance structure that is distinct from that of Vatican City. Led by a Grand Master, the order consists of around 13,000 knights, dames, and chaplains grouped into 3 classes with various subdivisions. Seeking to uphold the principles of poverty, chastity, and obedience, these members embody the SMOM's deep commitment to serving mankind with compassion and integrity.
第三部分介绍形容词 distinct， 表示不同的或是有区别的、显著的、明显的。我们可以说 The artist had a distinct style of painting. 这位艺术家有明显不同的绘画风格。又或者说 The new watch comes in 3 distinct designs. 这款新表有3种不同的设计。再来看到动词 uphold， 它的意思是维护或是支持。例如 It is important to uphold law and order. 维持法治是很重要的。再来我们看到名词 obedience， 指的是服从或是顺从。举例来说The king demanded a show of obedience from his court. 国王要求众臣展示服从。又或者说 Hannah took her puppy to an obedience class to learn how to train it. Hannah 带着她的小狗去上课，好学习如何训练它。最后可以看到名词 integrity， 它表示正直或是诚实。我们可以说I consider it part of my integrity not to lie, cheat, or steal. 我认为不撒谎、欺骗或偷窃是我为人正直的一部分。也可以说 People who are reliable usually have great integrity. 值得信赖的人通常都很正直。
All right, we are back. So let's get into the final part of our article. It says, furthermore, so we're learning more and more about the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, or as we see there at the beginning of this paragraph, SMOM, or SMOM. Furthermore, although the SMOM is a Catholic order connected to the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the Pope, and all that, it has its own governance structure that is distinct from that of Vatican City. As I said, they haven't always been best of friends. The Knights of St. John or the Military Order of Malta. So they have their own governance structure. They have their own leadership. They don't take all their orders from the Pope. They are somewhat independent of the Vatican City and the Pope and the Catholic Church. So that keeps them distinct from that of Vatican City. Governance, basically your own leadership, your own rules, your own laws, and that kind of thing. So they do have their own leaders and they don't have to follow what the Pope tells them to do. So this makes them distinct, unique, kind of independent, not quite fully connected, and separate on their own from the Vatican City. In other words, giving them freedom of their own decisions and actions and plans.
Right, so it has its own governance, which is when you can govern yourself. You could say it has its own governmental structure, and it's distinct or separate from that of the Vatican City. Now, led by a Grand Master, the order consists of around 13,000 knights, dames, and chaplains grouped into 3 classes with various subdivisions. Okay, so this is referring to the actual structure of this particular order. It's led by a Grand Master, so that's kind of like the president or the leader of this particular political entity. And this order contains or consists of around 13,000 knights. Okay, a knight, of course, is somebody who has been knighted by the king or the queen or whatever. We've also got dames, so that's the female equivalent of a knight. And then we've got chaplains, which are like Catholic priests. But when I see the word chaplain, I usually think of a Catholic priest in the military. Okay, so if you're in the army or something and you need some spiritual guidance, if you're Catholic, you can go talk to the chaplain.
So that's the different levels. If you join, you might end up being in one of those levels. So this is 3 classes with various subdivisions. But then there are smaller groups under this. So you could be a certain type of knight or a certain type of dame or chaplain. So it's a slightly complicated, but probably not too difficult to understand organization. But there are smaller groupings within the larger grouping. That is what we call a subdivision. Seeking to uphold the principles of poverty, chastity, and obedience, these members embody the SMOM's deep commitment to serving mankind with compassion and integrity. A lot of these values go back to when they were a fighting religious order during the Crusades, and they were upholding principles of poverty. Making money and keeping money wasn't really supposed to be an interest of theirs. Chastity, keeping yourself pure, sexually pure possibly, but also just spiritually pure, not lying, not cheating, being kind to people who need help, being honorable to women, that kind of thing. And obedience, following the rules of the church, the teachings of the church, and the commands and orders of your leadership, not kind of being an independent rebel on your own, but going with the group. These are all very important principles to uphold, to live by. When you uphold something, you maintain it, you respect it, you value it, and you keep it going for the next generation. So you're not seeking to change things, to become a revolutionary. No, you're seeking just to follow the same rules as people did before, and you hopefully people will do later on. So they embody their deep commitment to serving mankind with compassion and integrity.
Indeed. So they uphold those principles, they maintain them, and of course they have this commitment to serve mankind, and they want to do it with compassion and with integrity. And here, integrity means you are just honest and you have strong moral principles. You could be a man or a woman of integrity, and people would respect you and they would honor you. So this is the goal of this particular entity with all those subdivisions and their structure. They want to uphold those principles, again, of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So back to the word obedience, that's when you obey someone. So the verb is to obey. You will obey my orders. And of course, the opposite of that is to disobey. Ooh, you disobeyed my order. You're going to have to give me 50 push-ups.
And that, of course, would be disobedient. If you disobey, you are disobedient. We will be obedient right now and sign off by handing things over to Hanny, but we'll be back with our discussion starter in a second.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文介绍了马耳他骑士团。那第二部分的第一句提到，虽然没有领土，但该骑士团保留其主权地位，这使它能够与100多个国家维持外交关系。文中是用 enable 这个动词来表达使能够的语义。那它是由字首 en 再加上 able 而来。那我们来介绍这个字首。这个 en 字首呢，可以表达使、造成或是加诸、提供的意思，常常会加在形容词或名词的前面来形成动词。那么在 enable 这个字当中，字首 en 表示使、加诸，那么 able 表示能够什么什么的，合在一起 enable 就可以表达使能够、使可能。好，顺便补充几个有相同字首的单字。第一个是 endanger， 这个字首 en 表示使、造成， danger 是危险，所以合在一起呢 endanger 就表示危及、危害，使面临危险。第二个介绍的是 enroll， 字首 en 它表示使，那么 roll 是卷轴、名册，合在一起 enroll 就表示登记啊、注册或是使加入。补充一下，以前的书籍文件书写在羊皮纸上，并且是以卷轴的形式收藏，因此呢 roll 就有书册啊、名单、名册之类的意思。好，那么另外要注意的是，当字首 en 它碰到 b 或是 m 或是 p 开头的字根时， en 会同化为 em。 像课文第二部分它有用到 empower 这个字，它的字首 em 就是来自 en 来表达提供， power 是权力，合在一起 empower 就表示授权、赋权、使有力量的意思。看到课文第三部分，他提到骑士团的组成，那有分为3个等级，底下有各个不同的分支。文中是用到 subdivision 来表达分布、分支。那它的字首 sub 很常见，这边也来帮同学们做个补充。sub sub 在现代英文中常常用来表示在点点点下方或是附属的意思。像 submarine 这个字呢，它的字首 sub 表示下方， marine 是海的，那合在一起 submarine 就是指海底的、海面下的，或是可以指潜水艇。还有像 subordinate， 它的字首 sub 表示附属，字根 ordin 它是指命令、次序，然后 ate 是形容词字尾，合在一起 subordinate 它就是形容隶属的、次要的。好，那再补充一下， sub 之后去接 c 或是 f 或是 g 或是 m 或是 p 的时候，它就会变形成 suc、suf、sug、sum 或者是 sup。 举例来说， suffocate 这个字，它的字首 suf 是来自 sub 表示下方， foc 这个部分是喉咙的意思， ate 是动词字尾，那东西卡在喉咙下方可能会造成窒息，所以这个动词 suffocate 就表示窒息而死，或者是使窒息而死的意思。好，那以上今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Charitable. Mrs. King takes part in various charitable activities, from volunteering at animal shelters to raising money for hospitals. Diplomatic. Diplomatic talks are being held in the hopes of preventing a war between the two countries. Postage. The postage for mailing a standard letter increased by a few cents last month. Distinct. Despite being identical twins, Larry and Jerry have distinct personalities. Obedience. The soldiers showed complete obedience in responding to the general's orders. Integrity. Many voters refused to vote for the politician because they doubted his integrity.
Discussion starter starts now!
And here we are with that discussion starter. Which sovereign entity, Vatican City or the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, do you find more interesting and why?
Well, I find the Sovereign Military Order of Malta to be more fascinating, seeing as it doesn't have any territory. I had never heard of this before, an actual political entity existing without any land. This is the first time I've heard about this, and I wonder if that could possibly exist for other countries as well.
Well, I agree with you with that, Roger, but I will also say I think that the Vatican City is the more interesting sovereignty, given that it actually has territory. It is actually a place you can find on a map. Vatican City certainly has a bit more influence around the world, so I think I would start there. Plus, I might go there and hopefully not get my pocket picked. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.